Okay. Okay, then, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I hope everyone is hearing me well. If anyone is not hearing, please say now.
Or you can raise up your hand with a reaction.
Yes. Otherwise, I will start. So last time we were. This is a summary of the second part. We are now in the second part of this marathon lecture. It was not intended to be a marathon lecture, but this is how it came. So we spoke last time about the atheistic revolution. You could also say atheistic religion, which was in the beginning of last century a positivist and scientific attempt to substitute, to find actually a scientific substitute for religion. It had a very big impact on science, but it failed. It failed because of the all universal generalizations in almost all branches of science failed. And the generalization failed because of the incapability principles which we found in, or they found, actually everyone found at that time, which are intrinsic in physics and mathematics, especially physics and mathematics, and also in other sciences. There was also the idea of making randomness a sort of ontology, means we want, if we don't want to believe in religion, we would like to believe that this world is random per definition, per se. This failed also because they found out that the phenomenon of randomness in itself is undecidable. So we talked also last time about what is a scientific model for a phenomenon P, what is science, and what is pseudoscience. Now, there are three properties of scientific endeavors as per modern cognition theory, something like what Karl Popper did. It's not actually not only Karl Popper, all of them. When I say Karl Popper, because he is the one who started this, but there is also Kuhn, and there are others who talked about it. Basically, we say that a scientific model for a phenomenon P must have the following three properties. It must be empirically testable, means you have something like a falsification procedure. We will get to some examples which will clarify it more. So it must be testable. Whatever model you do of a phenomenon P must be testable. It must be supported also by evidence. And we spoke about the types of evidence in the first part of this lecture, where we said that there is objective scientific evidence leading to empirical knowledge, like what I do if I say, for example, all people in my house are good. Yeah, I can test this, and then I can find out whether this assertion is right or wrong, and I can do this because this is a finite domain. I can do this in a way which gives me at the end knowledge. I know they are all good, for example. Okay, maybe good is not a good example. Let us say tall. Yeah, everyone in this house is tall. If I have 10 people, I can measure them, and then I will know. I will know for sure whether they are tall or not tall. Yeah. On the other side, there is empirical, also objective scientific evidence leading to empirical belief, like the uncertainty principle, for example. We don't have a proof for it in physics, but it's actually a hypothesis, but it is built upon some negative evidence. A lot of negative experiments which could not give us very precisely the momentum and the place of an electron. It must be also reproducible, and this is what makes science. This is what differentiate between science and your subjective experience. So those three things they make up what we call a scientific model of a phenomenon P. And when we say this, we mean any phenomenon P. It's not like for example, we say the religious phenomena are aside and the non-religious are not aside. No, uh, uh, we treat everything in the universe in modern cognition theory as in the same way. Either we do some scientific models for it, or we cannot do these scientific models, and we'll see in that case what we'll do. I'm having here some very simple illustration examples to the difference between pseudoscience and science. Let me see. For example, the hypothesis unicorns might exist in remote planets or parallel universes. This is unfalsifiable. Why? Because we cannot go to remote planets and parallel universes until now. If we can go one day, then it becomes falsifiable. So because it is unfalsifiable, it is also unscientific. Another example might be, this is an example for now, the opposite example, a scientific theory. Dalton's atomic theory has been superseded by more accurate atomic models, since it has been found that the atom is not indivisible. So this guy Dalton, he suggested that atoms are indivisible. Now, this is a scientific theory. Why? Because at the time where he suggested this, there was no evidence to the opposite. And then when we found evidence to the opposite, it became false, but it is still a scientific theory. Why? Because it was testable, it was supported by some evidence, and it was reproducible. Now we come a little far from physics. Andrews and Thomson's hypothesis. These are two people working in psychology. The hypothesis that depression is an adaptation. Adaptation means in the evolutionary sense. Depression is an adaptation, is falsifiable, but not supported by evidence, and hence it is not scientific. So I can know whether depression is an adaptation or not. I can know this. I can test this, but it is the original claim is not supported by any evidence. Yeah. So this is why it is not scientific. Now I'll go to the classical case of Freud. If you remember, we had a discussion about Freud and Durkheim last time. Oedipus complex refers to a child's unconscious sexual desire for the opposite sex parent and jealousy, hatred to the same sex parent. This is a very famous Oedipus complex. And this is what Freud told us about it. Every new arrival on this planet is faced by the task of mastering the Oedipus complex. Anyone who fails to do so falls victim to neurosis. So Freud is actually saying that if you cannot solve your Oedipus complex, then you will get neurosis. In the same time, there is the psychoanalysts consider the repressing the psychological mechanism and impulses when. One moment, I don't see my own writing. I will, yeah. So they consider that repressing the psychological mechanism in which desires and impulses are kept out of consciousness. Repression is the psychological mechanism in which desires and impulses are kept out of consciousness. So they say you can always keep out of your consciousness some desires and impulses. So now, if you combine the two of them, therefore, the diagnosis of the Oedipus complex is essentially unfalsifiable, because even when the complex is not observable, it can be said to be repressed. The Oedipus complex also exhibits problems of testability if we consider the psychoanalytic concept of reaction formation. So these are here examples of theories which are made, but they are at the end pseudo science. Why? Because you cannot test them. In the case of Oedipus complex, it is unfalsifiable. Why? Because even if it is not observable, it can be said that it is repressed. So I can always say that everyone has Oedipus complex, and so this it is something which is canonically valid, where I cannot really test and say that's right or wrong. Now this is an introduction of the classical uh, uh, way we distinguish between science and pseudoscience. I will apply it now directly to the current models of the Quran and the associated problems with them. Now, when I say current models, I mean more or less Western models, because of course, from our side, from the Islamic side, we have other sciences, which we will also come to at the end of this lecture. But the current models, first of all, the current models attempt to explain the content, not the form. Of course, why I take the Quran? Because Quran is the center of Islam. It is said to be the book revealed to Muhammad والسلام, by God. So we are focused on Quran, of course. Now, all current models attempt to explain the content, not the form. First of all, these are some properties of the current models. We explain today the content, not the form, although the form also very peculiar. Of course, this is historically motivated also because knowledge of the Arabic language has unfortunately declined with years, even in Muslim countries. The content is explained in modern Orientalism. We have something called Orientalism, as you all know, and this is mainly concerned with Quran and its work in the modern sense. Methodically, all these studies, they insist on the assumption that Quran's origin is similar to the Old and New Testament's origins. And this is what we talked about before, what I called, actually it's not my name, but this is a name Durkheim called his theory, Universal Churches Theory. So actually, the idea, from the methodology, Orientalism takes up the challenge to understand Quran using in the background of its head the UCT model, which was used also for the the big religions, at least Judaism and Christianity. Also, there is a very clear refusal of evidence from traditional Islamic sciences. Why? Because, of course, they say the Muslims may be saying things about their religion which are not true. So let us study it from the objective perspective. So there is a refusal of evidence from traditional Islamic science. Now, the worst thing, from my opinion, is that it is confined to pseudoscience. We will see examples of the pseudoscience in the coming slides. But the first remark: the level of knowledge of Arabic is poor to very poor. Actually, most people who study these things, they cannot show a good. When I say most, I mean especially in the last decades or so, because in the beginning of last century there were much more literate and big professors who knew Arabic much better. Today, unfortunately, it's not really the case. What is happening that only selected verses are studied in a goal-oriented, mostly out of context way, as we are going to see now from the glimpses on a New York Times article, which reflects actually what scholars were at that time thinking. And the article title is "Scholars Are Quietly Offering New Theories of the Quran." It was published in 2002. So it's now a little old, but it's not so old because it is in the era of what they call revisionism of Islam. There is also a book, an important book, from an important author called Edward Said, who was like a landmark author. He himself is Christian, Arab Christian, Palestinian Christian, and he claims that historically all these studies were biased through political agenda. But the book made a big difference. It's like a landmark because people started to quarrel about it, and some will defend and some will attack, and so on. So I will go over to show some content, and I'm calling these slides examples of applying UCTs to Quran. From my perspective, I'm interested in the methodology. I'm not even interested in the content at this stage. So let's read together what is in this article. For example, the famous passage about the virgins is based on the word hur, which is an adjective in the feminine plural meaning simply white. Islamic tradition insists the term hur stands for huri, which means virgin. But Mr. Luxemburg is the pseudo name of an Orientalist, insists that this is a forced misreading of the text. In both ancient Aramaic and in at least one respected dictionary of early Arabic, hur means white raisins. Mr. Luxemburg has traced the passages dealing with paradise to a Christian text called Hymns of Paradise by a 4th century author. Mr. Luxemburg said the word paradise was derived from the Aramaic word for garden, and all the descriptions of paradise described it as a garden of flowing waters, abundant fruits, and wine raisins, a prized delicacy in the ancient Near East. In this context, white raisins, this is again the words of Mr. Luxemburg, white raisins, mentioned often as hur, makes more sense than a reward of sexual favors. So this guy is actually saying that what Muslims believe to be the reward in the afterlife of men, to be with beautiful women and so on, this is wrong. Why? Because it is a misinterpretation of a text from the Aramaic, which he believes to be the source of Quran. Now, we read in the Quran itself, there is evidence to the contrary from the Quran, where the Quran itself says what? They will recline with ease on thrones of dignity arranged in ranks, and we shall wed or join them to hur with beautiful big and lustrous eyes. I find it amazing that this guy compares, skips this. It's not only this verse, actually, all the verses where you find hur are always linked to verbs like wed and join. So I ask myself, of course, the question, how am I going to be wedded to a raisin, actually? And it doesn't come into his mind. He just writes it down, and he was criticized for exactly this attitude. He will take a word from the Quran, find some Aramaic counterpart out of context, and then just claims something like this, which is very easily refutable from the Quran itself. So this is one way this pseudo-scientific attitude shows. Here is another part from the same article. Another colleague of this guy, Mr. Wansbro, insisted that the text of the Quran appeared to be a composite of different voices or texts compiled over dozens, if not hundreds of years. After all, scholars agree that there is no evidence of the Quran until 59 years after Muhammad's death, when the Dome of the Rock Mosque in Jerusalem was built, carrying several Quranic inscriptions. Now, Quranic verses on this mosque, in the Aqsa Mosque, are actually written in Kufi. Kufi is a form of writing of Arabic. So, although these verses are written in Kufi, this did not prevent his colleagues for example, a Mr. Martin Links and Yassin Safadi, to claim that the Kufic script did not appear until the late era of the 88th century. They suggest that all Quran manuscripts written in Kufi could not have been written earlier than 150 years after the Ottomanic recession was supposedly compiled, i.e., at the earliest during the late 700s or early 800th century. Now, this is really amazing how you from the one side acknowledge, and you cannot deny it because it's a rock. You cannot just say this document doesn't exist. It's easy verifiable also from the point of view archaeology. So, and then you just say we will accept the Kufi on the wall, but we don't accept the Kufi in the uh, uh, scripts or documents for a mysterious reason. This is another example. Uh, Now, this is my favorite one. Miss Krohn is one of the big scholars, and she's now you will see that she is thinking very rational. She says she insists that the Quran and the Islamic tradition present a fundamental paradox. The Quran is a text soaked in monotheistic thinking, filled with stories and references to Abraham, Ishaq, Joseph, and Jesus, peace be upon them, and yet the official history insists that Muhammad, an illiterate camel merchant, received the revelation in Mecca, a remote, sparsely populated part of Arabia, far from the centers of monotheistic thought, in an environment of idol-worshipping Arab Bedouins. So she continues, unless one accepts the idea of the angel Gabriel, Miss Krohn says historians must somehow explain how all these monotheistic stories and ideas found their way into the Quran. There are only two possibilities, Miss Krohn said. Either there had to be substantial number of Jews and Christians in Mecca, or the Quran had to have been composed somewhere else. Now, this is part of the article for which I gave the link, the first one, in 2002. Of course, her colleague, the same Mr. Luxembourg, the guy with the raisins, he argues that the Quran has been misread and mistranslated for centuries, and his work, based on the earliest copies of the Quran, maintains that parts of Islam's holy book are derived from pre-existing Christian Aramaic texts that were misinterpreted by later Islamic scholars who prepared the editions of the Quran commonly read today. So this was the standpoint in 2002 of these people. Of course, we remark here, because we are speaking about science and pseudoscience, that his hypothesis, parts of the Quran are misinterpreted originally Aramic Christian texts, which he bases upon his insight we discussed about the raisins and the holes, is arrived at simply by ignoring evidence from the Quran itself. Yeah? He just generalizes, he ignores evidence, and that's it. Now let us see what happened with the perspective of Mrs. Krohn with time. She unfortunately died in 2015, but before that she wrote this article, which is a very, very interesting article. I just read it today actually in detail, and it is very, very insightful. It states, but for academic historians of early Islam, the early stabilization of Quranic text is one of the few areas which a broad spectrum of scholars agree on. In the words of the recently departed historian, Patricia Krohn, this is actually, okay, this is the article of Patricia herself, and this is another article which refers to the same. So the recently departed historian Patricia Krohn, a widely acknowledged expert on early and medieval Islam, she says, we can be reasonably sure that the Quran is a collection of utterances that Muhammad made in the belief that they had been revealed to him by God. Now, this is a clear departure from what she said 12 years before that. He is not which is not not bad, but we will see that she didn't really take the conclusion, because as we saw in the last page, uh, her clear statement, her clear, very rational statement, there are only two possibilities. Either there had to be substantial number of Jews and Christians in Mecca, or the Quran had to have been composed somewhere else. This is a kind of statement where you must take position. If you say now Muhammad is the one, like she's saying now, she said before she died, Muhammad is the one who is alayhi salatu wasalam, is the inventor of Quran. In that case, you have to go back in what you said earlier, where you just cannot explain how a merchant, even if he is literate, how a merchant received all this in a remote, sparsely populated part of Arabia. So her last idea was, we can reasonably be sure that the Quran is a collection of utterances that Muhammad made in the belief that they had been revealed to him by God. He is not responsible for the arrangement in which we have them. They were collected after his death. How long after is controversial. Now, I'm writing here that this is the same scroll from the last slide. Did she answer the rational question how an illiterate or literate, whatever, merchant can write Quran? No, she didn't. And in any case, carbon dating, a physical, actually, most probably she was convinced because of what happened in 2014 and 2015, where they carbon dated for the first time 3 independent copies of the Quran, where very large fragments of the current Quran were found, actually. So the carbon dating, a physical experiment, verified her new opinion and showed the same ordering of verses which we have today as well. Now, interesting is, and this is why I kept it here as an example for pseudoscience, some of her colleagues still are refusing the results of carbon dating. Now, I have here a methodological question related to carbon dating itself in this context. If you accept it as evidence, how credible is any work refusing it? In physics, it would be something like refusing the double slot experiment, just because you don't want it. And if you refuse it as evidence, how do you know the approximate age of any document then? So my problem is, if you say carbon dating is a methodology of modern Orientalism, and you say we accept it, then you should apply it radically and scientifically on all and every thing, and accept the results and not play with them or refuse them if you don't like. Yeah? And if you refuse it as evidence, which is at the end you're right, because it's only an experiment, it's not knowledge, it's only belief. Okay, it is a very or relatively good way to know the approximate date of anything. It's used also in other disciplines, not only in Orientalism, but you have the right to refuse it. But then I will doubt the age of any other document which you have. How can you tell me that the first Quran is in the golden age century then? How will I believe you? So I think this is a little, it's a crisis, I think, inside the Orientalism until now, to choose methodologies, and this is what make them until now still pseudoscientific, because they cannot, they are still not strong enough to say, okay, let's take this as evidence, or let's deny it as evidence. If the last was only some examples, now we'll get actually to the core of what I wanted to show you, or to discuss with you. Let's think a little about the rational materialistic models which we can do for Quran. And by materialistic, I mean one suggesting man-made artifact. when I say materialistic, let's just be objective and throw all our history behind us and say let's just assume that we can do some rational materialistic model of the Quran. Means the Quran is man-made. It's not from God, it's man-made. So this is the assumption of any model from this category, which we can do. We have some facts to consider. Yeah. So this is actually the rational approach to say, let's forget that it is any beliefs we have about it, and let's just suppose that it is man-made. But we will still have to understand how it is made. We cannot just leave it. We cannot say man-made artifact and then just leave it. Well, if it is man-made, then of course we can think about how it is done. So there are some facts to consider. And the facts which I'm listing here, they are actually very simple, simplifying my life. Just 4 facts, which will result into empirical belief or empirical knowledge. As we said from the past 2 parts, I hope you are still remembering that either we have empirical belief or we have empirical knowledge. We excluded the mathematical knowledge because we are not talking about mathematical proofs here. Yeah? So we are just talking about empirical proofs leading to empirical knowledge or empirical belief. The first fact, and this is exactly what we were talking about now, that the early Quranic manuscripts carbon date Quran between the years 20 and 40, 40 years after the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him. This means 672 AD. This includes, and you can go and see it, includes actually 3 manuscripts. And the 3 manuscripts have in common chapters 17 to 36, out of which I have chosen the verses in the document. If you remember, I sent you this document very early. So actually, for my purpose, it is enough. So the verses which I send you in the document, we can fairly assume as fact number 1, they were approximately in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Fact 2, the golden age of the Islamic civilization started in the Abbasid era, means in the year 786 AD. What started? Especially the translations. So around the time of Abu Bakr, for example, the first Khalif, it is not known that anyone could translate easily, or maybe even translate even vaguely from other languages into Arabic. Why is translation important? Of course, because of the claim that the Quran took at least some of its parts from Christianity or Judaism. The third fact, now this is maybe not known to many of you, the jurisprudence schools were created before the Golden Age. Means, for example, as you know, maybe there are 4 schools, and the first 2 were Abu Hanifa and Malik in this order, and then Al-Shafi'i and at the end Ahmad ibn Hanbal. These are jurisprudence schools which formalized whatever axioms and inference rules and so on were present in the Quran, and used also a lot of hadith for this sake. And they were actually created before the Golden Age. They were not created within the Golden Age, they were created before the Golden Age, and actually, from the Islamic point of view, they were responsible for the Golden Age. Because for the first time, the Muslims started to take their own, the Quran and their own background, or let us say the miracle which they got in their perspective, take it seriously and apply it in life. And this created the Golden Age, actually. So the jurisprudence schools were created before the Golden Age. Now, F4, the Quran includes, and in the fragments here, the Quran includes in those fragments, I mean here, those, the fragments which are proven to be, or which are most probably in the 20 to 40 years after Prophet Muhammad's death, alayhi salatu wasalam, the Quran includes three different types of verses. You have event-driven or event-oriented verses. For example, when there was a battle, when there was something in the life of the Prophet, there will be some revelation. It includes modified stories of Old or New Testament, of course, things which are similar but not exactly the same like in the Old and New Testament. And it includes also the cognition-related verses, which I send you in the attached document. I send you an example of, but there are uh, more. I send you around 35 verses. They are around maybe 100, 120 verses, something like this. Now, we are trying to be rational, so bear a little with me. Here are the possible creation criteria for leading to a hypothesis for us to do a rational materialistic model. Again, we are assuming that it is man-made. So either there is a single author or there are multiple authors. Either there is literacy, the author or authors have literacy, and it needs to be not only in Arabic because of this translation thing. So to cover the translation, we cannot assume that the people who ever wrote the Quran are only literate in Arabic. It will not work. Then we will not have, we have a big question, how did they take this from the old books? Because the old books were obviously not written in Arabic, in Aramaic, like this guy said, or maybe in Hebraic. So literacy, not in Arabic, yes, no. Single, multiple authorships. The time before or after the Golden Age. This is also very important. Of course, our friends, the Orientalists, they tend to go after the Golden Age, like we saw in the examples. Uh, why? Because after the Golden Age, you will be having much more possibility for to find knowledgeable people. Yeah? So we have here 8 possibilities actually. Single author, literate not only in Arabic, and the time is before. Multiple author, literate not only in Arabic, after the Golden Age, and so on. So we have 8 possibilities to go through. And even if it is now very simplistic, what you see here, it's simplistic, I agree. You can make much more criteria and make the number of possibilities more, but it will always be finite. It will never go, and it will not be a very big number of possibilities, by the way. So we don't have infinite number of hypotheses. As a rationalist, I cannot have for such a case an infinite number of hypotheses. It's not like, for example, aliens can have, because I'm saying man-made, so it's not the aliens couldn't have written the Quran. It couldn't have been someone who, for example, traveled, who wrote the Quran and then traveled to, found the time machine, who came from the future and wrote the Quran. So I'm neglecting many nonsense possibilities and concentrating on the most important ones, which were also discussed in Orientalism and which are in the minds of everyone, also the Muslims. Single or multiple authorship, literacy, not only in Arabic, yes, no, and time before and after the Golden Age. Now, I will take the most important 2 options. First of all, the option that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a literate author. Why didn't I take the option that he is illiterate? Because evidently, if he was really illiterate, like Islam says, then we stop. We stop. It cannot be. So then we have, because as per Islam, he was not even literate in Arabic. And if this would have been really the case, then we stop, because then of course then something miraculous has happened. So I will take the option, the RMM option. Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a literate author. The content example of what he wrote, he's a literate author. He alone, actually. He's a single author. So the content example you have in the attached file, and I will concentrate on the verses which are in the attached file. There are 35 verses out of the total 6,348 of Quran in 10 different scientific subjects. What are the problems? First of all, he needs to have been literate in other languages too, as we saw. Now, this is knowledge. It's not, this is empirical knowledge. We know that whoever, if we know why it is knowledge, not belief. We know that whoever wrote the Quran, if he is a man, really, like we are assuming, then he must know other languages. So this means Muhammad, والسلام, peace be upon him, must have been literate in other languages, not only Arabic. The second thing, because of the nature of the scientific verses, which I don't know whether you had time to look upon them or not, they need long preparations for the scientific material. If you go through them, you will find, for example, the verses where where the Quran in very much detail explains what happens in the belly of the woman when she bears an embryo. Now this is medical information. So to write something like this, you need long preparations for the scientific material. Now, to do this long preparation for scientific material, as we all know, of course, especially if you are academic, where it cannot be in the Arabian desert, when it cannot be after he became prophet. Of course, you cannot do long preparations after you become prophet, because all the time you are in the focus of the attention. It's not like, okay, give me 5 minutes and I figure it out how the embryo evolves. And then even write it down in literacy form like the Quran is. It's impossible. So it cannot be after he became prophet. How? He had to be conducting experiments on spiders, for example, like I mentioned in the document. You find the ayah, the verse about spiders, where it says that the spider building, where you can actually conclude, it is in the linguistic structure. It is the female form of a spider is responsible for building the house. Bees as well. So you need to conduct some experiments to be able to do something like this. It's not like just let's by chance let's write something about spiders, or let's write something about bees. It cannot be. So in this case, to know that a spider which builds a house is a female, not a male, you need to have knowledge. It's not easy. So you have to do some experiments. He not only copied, this is very important, and this is also a very important note of the Orientalists themselves about the stories, whether the stories from the Old and New Testament, or the things from the medicine and so on. He not only copied but formed his own theories in all subjects. C.6 embryo creation story. They are saying, or the people who counter this, they say yes, whoever wrote the Quran had Galen. Galen is a famous Greek medical guy, and the embryo creation story in the Quran is similar to Galen, which is not the case. If you go, and you will find that I found a place where they analyzed both things, and they found out, no, what the Quran is saying about the embryo creation is not like what Galen is saying. In any case, this assumes scientific training. You cannot just write down the embryo development. And of course, this is not also in the Old and New Testament. So he has to be having some form of other books also, scientific books to refer to. The next point is also very critical. If Muhammad is the one, والسلام, who is in the center, who is the author, whatever he uttered from the Quran was event oriented. Most of the Quran is event oriented revelation. For example, someone came to him and then Allah sent verses. There was a battle and so on. So this contradicts the long preparations. How will you differentiate between things which need long preparations and things which you will invent immediately on the fly? Actually, the Quran doesn't seem to recognize. it's actually one flow. For Quran, you don't have the impression that anyone prepared anything. So the piecewise event-oriented revelation contradicts the long preparations. Another observation, all verses related to any scientific subject, if you count them in Quran, they constitute less than 2% of the whole Quran, which is amazing. He didn't, when he, for example, wrote about the spider, when the Quran speaks about the spider, he speaks about the spider in a fraction of a verse. In a fraction of a verse. How can you spend much time in long preparation and then write it in a fraction? So this is also a problem. Now, another problem, his direct illiterate audience, if he is not illiterate, if he is literate, then of course his audience is illiterate. So his direct illiterate audience was unable to comprehend such issues, such scientific issues, comprehension starting from golden age of science, and not even then. And now this might be a surprise to you. The things which are in this document, which I resumed there, they were actually not even known in the golden age. No one in the there is no, give me one author, take the following exercise, find me in the golden age of Islamic science someone, any author who says the spider who builds a house is a female. This is a knowledge we have only today. They didn't have at that time. So if I resume everything about this model, we are still in this RMM, the rational materialistic model, where Muhammad is an author. We have, so this is a guy who spent his entire youth and big portion of his adult life studying in secret, because he's known to be illiterate, in secret other languages, as well as for his people unknown sciences, while also silently conducting experiments, all this in an until today unrevealed place, overhauling single-handed with new unrefuted theories what was known to be true or even divine by all neighboring civilizations. He speaks about Jesus and says, for example, that when he was a baby, he spoke when he was a baby. So he overhauled what is there in the Bible without any visible reason. And then when he decides to go public about his effort, he writes a religious, not a scientific or philosophical book, in which his new theories, if you concentrate only on science, in which his new theories about science constitute less than 2% of the entire volume, and in which he challenges all mankind. The Quran is bluntly challenging all mankind to bring something similar. His only goal of all this being to try to convince illiterate people. You do all this to convince at the end illiterate people who did not even care about science and knowledge in his time. And when he does that, he attributes this amazing book to the most abstract deity possible, which is Allah. He doesn't say this is my work, whose work, including Quran itself, is supposed to be understood only in approximation. At the end, the Quran says that we understand Allah's work only in approximation. The question is, why did he do all this scientific work? So how likely is all that? This is a question which actually also maybe was in the head of this lady, this late lady. How likely is that the guy does all this single-handed? I will go over to the other theory where multiple literate authors after the Golden Age did it. And this is also an important view. If we are still in the RMM, the materialistic way of thinking. So now we don't have one author, we have many authors. We are not in the age of ignorance. We are after the Golden Age, somewhere after the Golden Age. The question, did they write the whole Quran, first of all? Can those literate authors, is maybe this whole Quran and maybe even Muhammad, peace be upon him, is it fiction? Is it fiction? Maybe, because in some other cases it is known that prophets and founders of religion are not really authentic. It's not known. Some people contest Moses, peace be upon him. Some people even Jesus, and especially Buddha, for example. Now, in the case of Muhammad, there is overwhelming counter evidence of the existence of Quran before the Golden Age, of course. Yeah, not only the scripts. The Muslims built all types of stones and mosques, and there is evidence that and you can read it. You can, if you like, can read it in the links I provided, especially the link this late Orientalist wrote, the article she wrote. Muhammad is, peace be upon him, is the only founder of a religion where there is overwhelming counter evidence that he existed really, and that Quran really existed. Yeah. So it cannot be that these multiple authors wrote it after the Golden Age. This cannot be. This cannot be. So the only other rational thing is that no, they didn't write the whole Quran. They only added or modified some verses in it. Now, this is the assumption which was for a long time held by many people before the carbon test. I don't know whether I'm sure there are some people who refuse the carbon test, so they will be sticking still to this assumption. Against this assumption, there is a long list of things to say. Against the assumption that multiple authors in the Golden Age wrote the Quran, I'm here putting them in ascending order of significance. First of all, the jurisprudence schools were created before the Golden Age. As I said in the fact number 3, we know that the schools were created before the Golden Age, and the main purpose was to settle debate around different interpretations of the Quran. So they were already before the Golden Age interpreting Quran. Now the big question is, how can you debate Hamlet before it is fully written? Can I debate any text? I debate Hamlet before Shakespeare even existed. Of course, this is a contradiction. Then the second point, who are the authors? Who are the authors? First of all, a very wide scope of specialization is needed. It's not only a religious book, as we said, it contains a lot of scientific assertions, which are also very detailed, so that they must be specialized in a way or another in those sciences. They cannot be from a specific jurisprudence school, because the other schools wouldn't allow it. Of course, imagine now that the Shafi'i school started to write Quran, the Hanafi will kill them. Yeah? It's because it's blasphemy. So you cannot assume that anyone, supposing that the literate authors came from the school, this is nonsense, because the others will never allow it. And we know us, the Arabs, they quarrel even when they see the moon. So it's not likely. It's very unlikely. When all of them see the moon today, the Arabs, they still quarrel whether they saw the moon or not. So I don't think this is really very far-fetched thing. And also, no one claimed ever to be the author of Quran, ever. And now this is also unique. No one ever claimed to be the author of Quran, whether in the time of Muhammad or after the time of Muhammad. And supposing still that there were these authors, where are the different versions, please? For example, if it is like Old and New Testament, why don't we find Al-Razi Quran? Like, for example, Barnaba Evangelion, like Lucas Evangelion. Why don't we find Al-Razi Quran? There is, on the other hand side, an abundance of hadith books and versions, and they were indeed written by men reporting the Prophet life, as we know. Now, my question is, if the Quran was written by some people, some literate people, like the hadith also, why don't we find this the same phenomenon in the like we find in hadith? Yeah. And this is a phenomenon which we can prove. Actually, we can prove that the hadith books and so on, they have very many versions, and they are a source of big disturbance because of the difference. And now we come to the, for me, most important part. If all this doesn't count as a counter evidence, what we are still in the hypothesis and counter evidence for the hypothesis. So the question is, if someone, because we already saw that they didn't write all, they cannot have written all the Quran. So they have added some things to the Quran. My question, the big question, the rational question, which content part was modified? As we said, for example, there were event-driven contents. Like, for example, after a certain battle, there will be some verses and so on. This also cannot be, they cannot have modified event-driven things. Why? Because most of them also, and this is maybe a little subtle information, linked to daily habits. For example, alcohol. Yeah. Suppose now I want to change Quran and tell the people, I'm now in the 21st century and let's change Quran. Why? Let's change Quran. Everyone is saying you have to change and do this and that. Let's change it. If I attempt to change the clause about alcohol, first of all, it was in the older version of the Quran, where it was explicitly written that you shouldn't drink the alcohol. Now I attempt to change it. I'm not only changing the script. It's not like changing a book. You have to change also daily habits of the people and habits of the people. So this change, it's not like if I don't see this in a script, then they will not do it. The people are not robots. If there was any change in an event-driven thing, there would have been maybe revolutions, because everyone will protest, because it became their daily habits. Like prayers, for example, we have 5 prayers per day. If someone comes with the idea, let's do 2. You see yourself that the discussions about, even in modern times, about things related to daily habits, they are very difficult. So it cannot be the case that someone went and changed something like this and it went unnoticed. Actually, what I'm trying to say here, if anyone had changed event-driven things, we would have known for sure. But there is no information about this. There is no evidence about this. Of course, there is no evidence about all this. Yeah, Old Testament stories. Okay, then this means that the modification was in Old Testament stories. Yeah, and indeed differences not only in the big picture exist between Quran and Bible and Old Testament, but mostly in details not known before. Like, for example, the baby Jesus speaks. Now here, if you want, suppose, for example, the baby Jesus speaks is in the Quran, and then I want to take it out. The question is why? Why should I do something like this? It's pointless. Because already I made my point that I'm similar to Christianity and Judaism. I made my point. Why should I change it? There is no point in changing it. Anyhow, still, it might be the case in both these cases. Now, uh, and therefore, I didn't really mark it with EK like I did before. For example, very wide scope of specializations. This is knowledge, empirical knowledge. We can prove that we need very wide scope of specialization for anyone or any group of people writing the Quran. We can prove that there is an abundance of hadith book which shows the clear difference between people. In the same time, there is nothing about Quran similar. The most important part for me is the cognition related part because it relates directly to science, where verses mentioned in the document, which I send you, relate to scientific facts known only today. I am here underlining that something like a spider, that the bees form very sophisticated communication systems. You can indeed read in the Quran that the bees use efficient ways to go to the flowers. How can he know such a thing? How can they know such a thing? Give me one source in the Middle Ages or even in the Middle Ages or even before. So those verses mentioned in the document, we know that okay, we have empirical belief because maybe I say to myself, maybe the first Muslims or the people in the golden age, they knew about the spiders, but especially the spiders, I didn't find in any commentary an explicit mention of a truth which is there before their eyes, and they didn't see it. So this is a very strong counterfactual thing. They couldn't have had this information. At least if we compare our own to today's empirical beliefs with the Quran. And the last but not least, and very important part is what we mentioned about the carbon test. Of course, I could have slashed all this and said only the carbon test is a source of objective scientific empirical belief, because the carbon text clearly rules out this because, as I said, all these verses which speak about science in a very detailed way and so on were not in the golden age. They were found in those manuscripts which were carbon tested. And there were three different manuscripts, actually, independent. One in Tübingen, you can read it in the link. One in Tübingen in Germany, one in Birmingham, and one in Sana'a in Yemen. So also this is not likely. Okay. Now, in the next slide, I will try to resume the overview from the logical point of view. So we have here all possible RMMs. Remind you again, RMM is a rational materialistic model. By materialistic, I mean that it is human-made. So the possible RMMs for the Quran, here are they. Sorry. The assumption that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a single author who is illiterate, it's very unlikely, as we said. What is the knowledge which talks against this? The highly cognitive content of Quran. And this is consensus of everyone. Now, at least I hope, I hope that there are no Orientalists out there who believes that an illiterate person can write the Quran. Really, I hope this. Really, it has become my hope now that people have a little sense in their mind. So he cannot be illiterate, which, by the way, is what Islam says about him. The literate assumption we saw in the last slide, in the last slides, there is also the assumption multiple literate authors. We just saw after the golden age, which is the current version of some Orientalists. Most of them, like this lady said in her brief article, they think it is Muhammad, single author is Muhammad, peace be upon him, but he is literate. So actually, most of them, they think it is Muhammad, but he's literate. After the golden age, no empirical belief supporting that, no evidence, no scientific evidence leading to empirical belief supporting that. There are, in all the cases, no clues for who did it, how, what is the motive, all this. To the contrary, as we just saw, the negation is supported in the last slide. So it is supported that it cannot be people, multiple authors in the golden age. Of course, before the golden age, it might be that Muhammad has like a gang of people writing this, which is also very improbable. Why? First of all, there is no evidence. And secondly, also, the highly cognitive content. If you are an illiterate author, you are not really helped if you get another bunch of illiterate people. They will not help you. So this is also very highly improbable. Now, the question, which maybe for the first time I am posing like this to all of you: what happens if all RMMs are inconsistent with our current empirical belief or empirical knowledge? This is a question. This is a real question. It's not. You might go and say, no, you are wrong in this option or in this option. I will do my own model, my own more realistic, materialistic model, and I will find out this is how the Quran was written. But what I'm saying here, what will happen if all those RMMs are inconsistent with our current knowledge and belief of many things, or how we see the world? This is a very central question. And I guess there are also very logical options. For example, make irrational ones. Very simple. Like the Orient, this is the option the Orientalists choose. This is the option where you say science is not working, let's make pseudoscience. This is exactly what they do. They try to figure out how the Arabs could have this big revolution in science and all this, and they couldn't, whether it is Muhammad or someone else, peace be upon him. You can read it by exactly the same wordings, maybe, like I'm saying here, that there was a big bang in the Arabian desert. There was a big bang. So in that case, we will say, some people will say, which is the wrong choice in my view, let's make irrational models. You can, for example, deny the carbon dating, and continue pseudo like you are. Yeah? Let's continue pseudo, deny the carbon dating, and we are all, and we will get the funding. You are always getting funding, by the way. Whatever you do, you can always get funding. This guy who insisted comparing the horse with raisins, he got funding. He's okay. I think now he's a little out of the job, but he gets funding for this. So we can continue irrational models, while maybe we can use also the idea that pseudosciences and not sciences are more relevant to religious studies. This is what we discussed last time. Now, I'm saying there are rational options. For example, continue trying to find counter evidence to whatever we know. Continue to find me, for example, versions of the Quran, for example, versions where I can say this is Razi Quran, yeah, not versions where there is a comma missing and then you say this is version. So continue to find me this. This is rational. I don't admit. You can tell me I don't admit all what you are saying, yeah. And I will, for example, for the literate case, the single author literate case, have other evidence. I will work to find other evidence. Yeah. It is also rational, by the way, that you do the following, and this is now the interesting part. We will assume that Quran admits no RMMs consistent with anything we know. We will come here. We come back to the idea of incapability. The big question, especially for me as a modern Muslim, which I'm asking myself, when I study Gödel, and Gödel tells me that there is internal in the logics undecidability, when I study physics, and in physics they tell me there is intrinsic incapability, then what the hell is the reason why I don't say, when I study religion, which is also a phenomenon, I shouldn't be able to say there is an incapability of explaining this. This is actually the incapability principle for religion. I'm saying Quran admits no RMMs, no materialistic models consistent with any of this. Why is this hypothesis scientific? It is scientific, whether we like it or not. It is weird. It opens another world, and this is exactly what happened in the Golden Age. By the way, this is exactly what people they tried for a long time to fight against Muhammad. They told him, you are crazy. You are all whatever we are saying now. They said it. It's not like they were apes and we are the brilliant ones. No. They were very bright people, and at the end, they made this hypothesis. Why is this hypothesis scientific? That we will not be able to find RMS consistent with anything which we find in the case of Quran. It is a Big Bang. It's a Big Bang. Can we find, for example, let me ask you the question, can we find for the beginning of this world any rational materialistic model? Of course not. We call this Big Bang in physics. We have a similar Big Bang in language. We have even in evolution a similar Big Bang. And there are actually 20 Big Bangs in evolution. Not only from protein to cell, and so on. So what the hell prevents us, sorry for what the hell prevents us of using the same idea of incapability? And it is after all this experimentation, we have now 150 years of Western Orientalism, ladies and gentlemen. Only Western. I will not speak about Muslims. If you only think about the taxpayers' money spent on this, and it is continuing, they are spending still on reasons which are whores and on people who just use pseudoscience, continue in this. And no one comes with a brilliant idea. Maybe we will never be able to make a RMM. And why is H scientific? Because first of all, you have you have evidence because you have done the RMMs. All these RMMs are evidence. They are really facts because you have done it. You have tried your best to find out that, for example, how can an illiterate person like Muhammad do this? You went and did archaeological work and whatever, even to find how a literate person like Muhammad can do this. You tried your best to have the assumption that multiple literate authors, but the evidence is overwhelming against whatever we do. We said the Quran didn't exist before Abbasid, before 150 years of the Prophet. Okay, in that case, if we had proof for this, and all is done, that's very good. But all of a sudden, we find manuscripts which defeat us, and defeat us horribly. Actually, this is horrible defeat for all of us. It's not, you know, when I ask myself, even as a Muslim, it's not the case that if Islam becomes wrong, that it is a disaster. To the contrary. If Islam is right, then it is a disaster. Because most of us, we are atheists, actually. Do we believe in God? I don't think so. Really, I mean, when I speak really, we take this all traditional. Yeah? So this is much more serious. Now, we have, we can do such an hypothesis, and it is testable, of course, because you have all these RMMs. You can always, all the time you can test things. You have the hypothesis that in the Golden Age something happened. This means that I can never find something in the previous ages, but I found. So this is testable. It is a falsification of my theory, and it is repeatable. Don't believe me, please. Go and read by yourself. You will repeat the same experience. So at the end, it is actually my own decision. Should I, if I fail in all this, understanding Islam in the right way, what should I do? There is the option to be irrational. It's maybe better for your head. Yeah. And the second is to either to continue. You will just continue and still be rational. You will not be convinced by Islam. You will still be rational, but you will still continue to find counter evidence. Or you will go and say, okay, let me do the hypothesis that I will never find such a consistent model, materialistic model, and you will still be scientific. And this is exactly the whole purpose of my presentation. You are scientific when you are taking this hypothesis. And this is what, at the end, the world from an Islamic perspective looks like. These people, these intelligent people in Arabia at that time, what they did is very simply, they went and said, we have a phenomenon. This is how they build so-called Islamic sciences, ladies and gentlemen. We have a phenomenon. The phenomenon is called Quran. It is not man-made, our hypothesis. It's not man-made. It exists physically. And our hypothesis is very simply, we cannot build rational materialistic models for it. And starting from there, this edge lend them to accepting the axioms of Quran. Of course, if you accept the axioms of Quran, you are in another world, in a completely different world, where you study Quran like you study the universe. You use all universal sciences which you know, and all empirical and mathematical. You use your reductionism, you use your chaos theory, you use everything. The incapability principle which lend you to say, okay, I will accept for the time. When I say for the time being, because of course this is a belief. It's not knowledge, it's a belief, ladies and gentlemen. So after all this overwhelming negative evidence, if I say it might be the case that I will never be able to explain Islam and religion in a materialistic way, I'm fully rationalist. I'm fully rationalist. I'm sorry, but this is rationalism, actually. And it is a belief, it's not knowledge. It is very clear. This means that any, and it is testable, by the way, any evidence against this will make me scrap all this. And if I remember last time, maybe Michael was asking whether religion is falsifiable. Of course, if I find that something is wrong in Quran is saying the earth is flat, for example. But what is happening is that I'm finding the opposite. What is really happening in the world, that I'm finding the opposite. People who become Muslim or who are Muslims, they are not stupid. They were never stupid, not in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, not and others also, by the way. No one is stupid. It's only a decision. Yeah. So at the end, I am fully inside the critical rationalism, which made also the physics possible. This is exactly the same picture in physics, ladies and gentlemen. Exactly. I have some axioms here, but the phenomenon in that case is in physics is the universe, physical universe. But what I do is essentially the same. I have terminology. I have some inference rule. I consider a formal system in that case, because it is Quran, it is Arabic as a formal system. So the Islamic science. This is what is Islamic science all about. Arabic is considered the formal system with which you, or to which you reduce this phenomenon. The phenomenon itself is considered to be a phenomenon of nature. We consider Quran like the universe, like you are studying the sun. Yeah, why? Because we couldn't find any artificial way to describe how it is built. So the Islamic sciences have very big similarity to physical and empirical sciences. Now, I'm maybe 5 or 10 minutes max. Maybe 5 only. I'll try to be short here. Axioms of cognition. What are the axioms of cognition? It's actually maybe the beginning of maybe a next, or after 100 years or something. So the axioms, which maybe, of course, you take the axioms after you accept the idea that we are incapable of finding material explanation. First of all, God in Islam is abstracte a definitione. God is you are not even allowed to speak to make metaphysics. Yeah, it's a very controlled vocabulary, metaphoric vocabulary which you can use with God. Quran is from God Himself, every word of it. Universe and Quran are not refuting, but completing each other. Actually, phenomena of the universe are called signs. So are verses. Ayah. The word ayah means sign. So the verse in the Quran is called sign, and the phenomena of the universe are also called signs. They are abundantly explained in the Quran. As I said, they are around 100. It's not very much, but it is, from the cognitive point of view, very substantial. Rational argumentation is a source of all, including religious judgments. Rationality in the broader sense, not only logics. This is very important. Rationality in the broader sense of recognition or cognition, pattern recognition, actually, if we want to be technical. Religion is innate in every individual. This explains why it is there. This is an explanation. The Quran explains the source of religion to be inside the human, not in the society. Like, for example, Durkheim said, last time we discussed this. You don't need priesthood. Why? Because it is innate. You need only science. And you have, the Quran is the first and most important open source book. It's open source. I don't know whether you are familiar with the open source movement in science and technology. Open source means anyone can become a scientist. Yeah? And all sciences are equal. They have the same concept everywhere. You cannot say, when we say all sciences, we mean sciences. And if we have pseudoscience, we try to elevate it to the level of a science. Then failure of falsification is the basis of the belief in Quran. You take a look, please, on point 11 in the attached file, the incapability principle, which we were discussing. Quran itself tells you, please try to negate me. Quran itself. What more can there be? Quran itself says that you should try to find something similar to me, or at least explain how I am written. So the failure to find the RMS of its origin and or cognitive mistakes in the content, this is the falsification procedure. So what we were just doing, this is the falsification procedure. This is exactly the falsification procedure. Another one could be to go through all these cognitive verses which I send you and try to find mistakes. And please just try, do it. Go and do it. Try to compare, and the translations are there. Of course, if you know Arabic, it's better. It's much better, of course, because you will know the original text. But it is open for everyone. It's open source. Yeah? Then only conscious beliefs are accepted. No one is forced. No one is forced. And this is also a verse in the Quran. Basic beliefs are not valid if forced upon subjects. By the way, this is the rule. It's a Quranic rule. Basic beliefs are not valid. So the idea of forcing children and all this doesn't exist, because scientifically and jurisprudence, from the jurisprudence point of view, they are all exempted from any beliefs. Children don't have any belief in Islam. They might believe in UFOs when they of course, if the parents usually explain to them, when you pray and your son is still young, he will ask you, of course, or she will ask you. It's not like I will not tell them. I will tell them, but they don't have beliefs. They don't have beliefs in this beginning phase. They don't have beliefs. Then this is very important. Now this is another mystery. Actually, this is maybe another. This is a mystery alone. Subjective experience is what all this Quran is all about. Quran is a relation between, not only between Muhammad and Allah, it's between anyone and Allah. You can make a very subjective and differentiated experience if you start reading it, and if you really take it earnestly. So these are the very simple axioms of cognition in Islam. this is the last slide. What are the applications of all this? Yeah? Let's see the applications. In ancient times, Muslims created algebra. Yeah? Yes.
You know, it's 5:45 our time. Hour and 45 minutes passed. You gone over your time limit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is the last slide. I'm sorry, but I really needed to finish. I want to finish. I don't want to. It's only one slide. The last slide is conclusion.
I know, but it's such an interesting subject so far. Fantastic. I commend you very highly for a great job.
But your voice is very bad. I hear you in a very.
All right, finish up.
Do you hear me?
You can hear me for some reason.
I don't hear you good.
Yeah, I'm having the same issue. I mean, I can hear El Nasser very well, but I cannot hear you, Brother Sayed.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, maybe it is. Okay, what do you want me to do, Sayed, please?
What I was thinking about so far.
Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you.
Okay, I changed my system. So now you done, it's a fantastic job. What a great presentation. I mean, I have so much to add today, but time is running out.
Okay,
so,
what should I do? What should I do? Tell me. should I restart the computer or what should I do?
No. What I'm thinking, can you finish it next week?
No, it's only one slide. Please don't do it.
All right, continue. Go ahead, finish
Just
up.
one slide. Okay. And in this slide, I just here I'm mentioning in ancient times, Muslims invented algebra. First and second order algebraic equations were invented to correctly model Quran's inheritance laws. So, which is amazing. Actually, when they decided to take the axioms of cognition of Quran and whatever Quran says, they were able to find some solutions of things, like, for example, the inheritance laws, which are very complex, actually. Islamic jurisprudence, fiqh, is conceived as a formal system of logics, first ever complete meta-science, ever. The first ever meta-science was meta-fiqh. Then came axiomatic natural science, introduced for the first time by Averroes. I mean, formally introduced. Of course, there were people before him, but formally he was the first one. And he was doing it also in parallel with formalizing his own fiqh. So people don't know that Averroes, who is the translator of Aristotle, was formalizing Islam like he was formalizing also natural science. They don't know this, but I can show it. I saw it myself. And then breakthrough discoveries in medicine, biology, astronomy, and so on, which are the seeds for the modern age. This all came from losing yourself from the traditional idea of the very strict formal idea of religion. You lose yourself from it. Yeah? Now, this is ancient. In modern times, and this is only my own work, let me just Google fiqh algorithms and you will find a formal study of machines. For the first time ever, I'm speaking, and this is not a good sign, by the way. It's a big scandal, actually, that we invented algorithms. And for the first time now, someone, my humble self, I'm studying machines assisting Islamic jurisprudence. You just Google and even discussing things like decidability, efficiency of fiqh algorithms. The keyword which I didn't write here because maybe it's a little not very welcome to many people, but you can call it e-mufti. You know the mufti? The e-mufti. Actually, the idea is that we don't want all these clerics and all these people. We want to formalize the fiqh as it should be, as it was formalized, and then automatize many aspects of it, so that everyone on earth can take the right impression and idea about what Islam is. I used also some insights from the Arabic language to propose a solution for the famous MP problem, and I published it. And I'm currently working on Arabic as a formal system. Arabic as a formal system. Conclusions, thanks God, long way. Incapability principles play key roles in defining axioms of modern science like physics. the same roles they played previously for Islamic sciences, resulting in axiomatic cognitive systems which are highly rational. I'm underlining highly rational. Muslims who really take their Islam seriously, they are very rational people. Evidence from the history of science acknowledge that. This is unfortunately, underline here, unfortunately, in contradiction with current Western UCT, universal Turing machines about religion. I call it universal Turing machine because it reminds me of my own Turing machine stuff. So the universal church theories about religion, everything which is religious has a certain schema which must be like this, and if it is not like this, we have to use pseudosciences to force it inside it. UCTs are causing cognitive gaps within intellectual Muslim as well as non-Muslim populations and need to be thoroughly revised in true scientific context. And last but not least, cognitive systems or cognitive contents of Islamic sciences may be used today as they were before to provide solutions for open problems in science and philosophy. Thank you very much for bearing with me on this, really.
You're welcome. Would you do me a favor, brother? First,
Yes.
go ahead and transfer the host to me back again.
Yes,
please.
How can I do this?
Just go to your
how can I stop? First of all, how can I stop recording?
Or just go to your recording button in the bottom. You'll see it. Push pause, then give it command to record in your computer.
I don't. Okay, pause. Stop.